Hello, everybody. It's Mr. Shanks here. Today we're going to go on to look at a couple of lessons around the media. So thinking about what the media is, first of all, and the bit that you'll need to know about for National 5 Modern Studies is thinking about the impact of the media. So in other words, what difference does the media make to politics, to the way decisions that are made in this country. So impact of the media is what we're going to think about today. What I'm going to do in this presentation is run through some information. There's some tasks inside the presentation, so you can come back to this video when you need to, but I'll also list the tasks in Microsoft Teams, which will hopefully make it a bit easier for you. Okay, so learning intentions for today, we're going to think particularly about what the three different main types of media are, which is important that you know these three types of media, and then start to think about how these impact you. Okay, that's the bit that's important. So, just to start off with, what does media actually mean? Well, media is just a word that we use to describe the way we communicate, mass communication. In other words, communication with lots of different people at the same time, right? So not texting your pals, because that reaches a few people at a time, but messaging big groups of people, the public, okay? It's about how we communicate, how we share and receive information. Now, there's three main types of media. These were categorized quite a while ago, and in some ways, the categorization of it doesn't really work so much anymore because the internet has changed the way that we all get our media. But they're still divided into these kind of three main groups: broadcast media, print media, and what's called new media. But really, new media covers social media and all the kind of online ways that we tend to get our news these days. So those are the three ones you really need to think about. What I want you to do as a wee task once you finish this is try to think about all the ways that you currently find out what's going on in the world. Okay, so by that I mean what's going on in the news, but also I mean what's happening with your pals, what's happening in the world of celebrities or music or gaming or whatever it is you're into. How do you find out what's going on in the world just now? What different ways do you use? Because if we were in the class, we'd do this as a kind of survey on the board, and I think we'd be kind of quite surprised how few of us nowadays get our news from any of those kind of traditional means, broadcast or print. Okay, so I'll put that in the Teams for you to have a think about. So the first one we're going to look at is broadcast media, and this is basically any time you see the news on your television or you hear it on the radio. So things like BBC News, ITV News, Channel 4 News, Sky News, anytime you see that on the television, but also if you listen to the radio, so if it's Newsbeat on Radio 1 or Clyde 1 News or whatever it is, that's all broadcast media, okay? The bit that's complicated is nowadays a lot of us, maybe most of us, I don't know, we don't watch television on the television. So we might watch bits of television news on a phone or on an iPad or something like that. That still counts as broadcast news. So even if you maybe watch the BBC News on the iPlayer on your phone, or you watch a clip of BBC News on Twitter, that counts as broadcast media because it's been produced by the BBC, which is a broadcaster. Okay, so this gets a wee bit complicated. You don't need to know this in too much detail. Just know that anything the BBC produces, for example, is broadcast media. Okay, so that's the first one. So the next one's print media, which is probably quite self-explanatory. It's basically what you would read in newspapers and magazines, but traditionally it was called print media because you had to go into a shop and buy something that was actually printed out. Nowadays, most people probably don't buy it in a physical format at all. They'll read them online, so they'll go to the Daily Records website or they'll go to the Daily Mail's website and they'll read the articles that those newspapers produce online. An example, lots and lots of newspapers have moved to online because that's where most people read things. The Independent, one of the oldest newspapers in the country, used to always be printed, but a few years ago they stopped printing the newspaper at all. So now it's entirely online. You can only read it on the internet, but it's still considered print media. right? So it's just, that's a kind of old-fashioned name, but because it is a newspaper, it's the print media. Okay, loads of examples of newspapers. You've probably got some lying around your house, maybe the Guardian, the Daily Mail, the Telegraph, the Sun, or local newspapers, Paisley Express, any of these kind of things. Okay, these are all print media. And the next one is new media, which isn't really that new anymore, but basically this is content that's specifically published online, but it doesn't include things that are produced by the other two types of media. So for example, if you were to read a BBC News article online, that wouldn't count as new media even though it's online, because it's produced by a broadcaster. Okay, so it tends to be things that are specifically made for an online audience, like TikToks or Snapchat content or YouTube videos or blogs or any of this kind of stuff. Okay, what it doesn't mean is like text messages between people. Okay, because that's not the media, that's just you texting people. So Snapchat channels would be a form of media. So for example, Boris Johnson set up a Snapchat channel during the election, but you snapping your mates, that's not new media. Okay, because your mates might be interested in it, but probably nobody else is. So Snapchat content does count, but think of new media as a lot to do with social media and stuff like that. So the main task I want you to think about is, you don't need to do it in a table like this. Normally we would do this if we were in class, but I want you to go away and think about these three headings, and you can watch this video back if you're not sure what they are again. Broadcast, print, and new media, and come up with at least 5 examples for each of them. Okay? And try and look them up on the internet, see what the 5 are, and just do them as a bullet point list, and I'll look over them. But it's really good for you to get into the habit of getting examples of some of these. Okay? I'll put this in the Teams as well so you know what we're doing. What I want to think about today, though, is, so these are 2 front pages from newspapers today in the UK, the Daily Mirror and the Daily Mail. They both show the same story, which was, you probably saw in the news yesterday, there was a protest in Bristol, and the statue was taken off its plinth and was thrown into, I think, a river or a canal or something like that in Bristol. And this was a statue of a slave owner, a man who owned slaves, and the people who were protesting this Black Lives Matter protest thought that actually it was wrong that there was a statue to a person who owned slaves, and so they tore it down and they threw it into the river. There's a lot of different opinions on this. You'll have your own opinion, I'm sure, and that's important. But what I want to just pick up on in here isn't so much the issue itself, but the fact that these are 2 front pages who show totally different perspectives on the same story. So you've got the Daily Mirror, which the headline is "The March for Change," which is quite a kind of positive thing. It's saying, look, here is the start of something that might be better, change being a good thing usually. Whereas the Daily Mail has the headline "Lawless and Reckless." In other words, this was a bad thing that happened, and the people who did it, the people who perpetrated this knocking the statue off, were lawless and reckless. So 2 really, really different perspectives on the same story. Now, you'll come up with your own opinion, but the point is, what we're going to think about when we're thinking about the impact of the media is, if you only bought one of these newspapers, would you be persuaded by that newspaper's opinion on this story? So I always tell the story about my gran, who's a lovely woman, but she reads the Daily Mail every single day, and so her perspectives and things always come from the Daily Mail. So if I was to phone her up today and say, Gran, what do you think about that statue being pulled down in Bristol? She would say, maybe not exactly this, but she would say, oh, I think it was lawless and reckless. Now, not entirely, because she's got her own mind and she can think independently, but a lot of people are persuaded by what they read in newspapers. And depending on what one you buy, you'll have a different perspective. So that's what we're going to think about mainly in the next lesson, is how we're persuaded by the media in our political opinions. Okay, so that's it for the PowerPoint today. Hopefully this worked okay. If this format works, I might do this more often, because it's quite good for me to be able to record it like this. I'll put the tasks in the post. Keep in touch if you've got any questions. Okay, cheers, bye.